Tell me which Kiliakosm sovereigns coveted the Chaos Dojo, and put their thought into action on top of that. Even with Kiliakosm sovereign Skyheart presiding over it, there must be some people who were unwilling to give up and took the risk, right? A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. He had only left the Chaos Dojo for 10,000 years, and someone had already dared to have designs on it. What if he disappeared for 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years in the future? Would his Chaos Dojo be completely divided up after his return? From the looks of it, even though Lin Feng had a terrifying reputation, his foundation was ultimately too shallow. He had only cultivated for a short period of time, and it seemed like he had yet to completely intimidate those with ulterior motives. In other words, his methods were not intense enough. At least, his vicious reputation had yet to be ingrained in people's hearts. Taking advantage of the fact that he was a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign and had yet to become an overlord, even if they attacked, they would not violate the rules set by the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns back then. Then, he would have to use forceful methods to intimidate the other Kiliakosm sovereigns in the medium Kiliakosm in one fell swoop. Kiliakosm sovereign Epic hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still said, "There are many factions that have been testing the waters, but the only one that has actually acted is the Bedlam Dojo." The Bedlam Dojo? That's right, the Bedlam Dojo. The other factions would at most probe and not really attack. However, the Bedlam Dojo and even Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam came directly to the Chaos Dojo in a menacing manner. In the end, Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart stepped in. I'm not sure what he said to make Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam retreat. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. He began to search for information on Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam in his mind. Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam could be considered famous in the medium Kiliakosm. He had never been a Kiliakosm sovereign who was content with his lot. In fact, his rise to power was very similar to Lin Feng's. He often competed with the other 4 Cataclysm, 5 Cataclysm, and 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. It was precisely because of this competitive personality that Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam did not lack small Kiliakosm origin during his rise to power, and successfully became a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. However, after becoming a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, it would be very difficult for Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam to continue like before. The small Kiliakosm origin required for the 7th epical cataclysm was more than 10 times that of before. Even 99% of the 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns found it difficult to accumulate enough small Kiliakosm origin. Hence, Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam set his sights on the Chaos Dojo. In particular, now that Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam was plagued by the cataclysmic power, he couldn't care less. Your Majesty, why don't we let this matter rest? That Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam ultimately didn't attack in the end. Didn't attack? If not for Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart and Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam knowing that he couldn't take advantage, how could he not attack? He's a 6 Cataclysm sovereign who's coveting our dojo in secret, and a Kiliakosm sovereign with cataclysmic power. I won't let my guard down and let him continue coveting it in secret. Moreover, it's been 10,000 years. Perhaps many people have already forgotten my methods. I've never killed a 6 Cataclysm sovereign before, so some people feel that they can act without restraint. I will personally confront Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam. Lin Feng made up his mind. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic also knew that he could not persuade him anymore. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, guard the Chaos Dojo. I'll be back soon. With that, Lin Feng circulated his spacetime power and quietly disappeared from the Chaos Dojo. The Bedlam Dojo was silent now. Many supremacies and even pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns felt terrified. In the dojo, no one dared to make any loud noises, for fear of affecting Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam. Right now, Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam was plagued by cataclysmic power, yet he did not have enough small Kiliakosm origin. He was destined to fail to survive the 7th epical cataclysm. Such a person could go berserk at any time. There was no need to offend Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam. If they angered Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam and he killed them, it was really not worth it. Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam's face was dark. He sat upright in the hall, and below him were those pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns. There were a total of 3 pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns in the Bedlam dojo. If Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam was reduced to ashes by the epical cataclysm, the same would happen to these pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns. Their small Kiliakosms would collapse instantly. Both parties were bound together for good or ill. This was not only a life-or-death moment for Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam, but also a life-or-death moment for pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns like them. Have you found it or not? No matter who it is, as long as there is a large amount of small Kiliakosm origin, I must obtain it at all costs. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam's voice was a little hoarse. It sounded even more sinister and terrifying now, revealing strong killing intent. The pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns looked at each other. They could only bite the bullet and say, "Your Majesty, the Kiliakosm sovereign, the whereabouts of the small Kiliakosm origin itself is top secret. Even the number of small Kiliakosms is top secret. It's impossible to investigate them at all. Hence, after careful investigation during this period of time, we still found nothing." Nothing? Don't you know that every second counts now? And you actually found nothing? Useless, all of you are useless. If I die, all of you will die. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam roared again. The entire hall seemed to be shaking. The 3 pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns fell silent in fear. At this moment, they absolutely could not contradict him. Otherwise, the furious Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam might really take his anger out on them and rip them to pieces. Fortunately, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam still retained his rationality and did not go berserk. Back then, when I wanted to attack the Chaos Dojo, I was stopped by Kiliakosm sovereign Skyheart. Humph, I was still wary of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign back then. Moreover, Kiliakosm sovereign Skyheart was not weak either, so I did not really attack. Now, it seems like I was a little overcautious back then. I didn't expect the situation to worsen today. You can't even find a single portion of small Kiliakosm origin. Looks like I still have to find the Chaos Dojo and ask for some small Kiliakosm origin. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam gritted his teeth, as if he regretted it, but also felt a little indignant. In the end, he was still a little wary of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign back then. After all, the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign was notorious. It was better not to offend the Chaos Dojo unless absolutely necessary. But now, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam could no longer care about anything else. He was about to die. What reservations did he have? The Chaos Dojo had annexed so many dojos some time ago. It must have obtained many small Kiliakosm. Over the years, it had also accumulated a lot of small Kiliakosm origin. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam did not know if the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign had already taken that small Kiliakosm origin. He might have taken it. In fact, it was very likely that he had. Still, there had been no news of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign in 10,000 years. In this 10,000 years, they must still have accumulated some small Kiliakosm origin. No matter what, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam had to give it a try. As for offending the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam was not willing to do that either. After all, Lin Feng had great potential. It would not even be a problem for him to become a 7 Cataclysm or 8 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign in the future. Now, he was reputed to be the controller with the greatest chance of becoming the 4th medium Kiliakosm sovereign. This was enough to show how strong Lin Feng's potential was. Unless absolutely necessary, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam did not want to offend Lin Feng. However, now that Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam was in a life-or-death situation, he could no longer think of a better solution. If he attacked the other 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, he might not be their match. One had to pick the weaker target. Although Lin Feng had killed the 5 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign before, a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign was ultimately above 5 Cataclysm. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam still had some confidence. Even if Lin Feng tried to stop him, he could not. At most, he would be unable to kill Lin Feng. However, he had to obtain the small Kiliakosm origin no matter what. The other 3 pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns also exchanged looks with each other. They knew the outcome of offending the Chaos Dojo very well, but at this point, they did not have much choice. In that case, I'll head to the Chaos Dojo at once. Kiliakazam's sovereign bedlam made up his mind. At this moment, an unfamiliar voice echoed in everyone's ears. Kiliakazam's sovereign bedlam, you indeed still harbor nefarious intentions. However, you don't have to go to the Chaos Dojo anymore. Buzz. In the hall of the Bedlam Dojo, accompanied by an unfamiliar voice, a figure appeared. Even Kiliakazam's sovereign's expression suddenly darkened when he saw this unfamiliar figure. You are the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Kiliakazam sovereign Bedlam recognized this figure. It was someone he was very unwilling to face. It was the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. However, hadn't the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign disappeared for 10,000 years? In fact, when he went to the Chaos Dojo previously, only Kiliakazam sovereign Skyheart was guarding it. Are you very surprised? I just returned to the Chaos Dojo and heard some things that confused me. I even heard Kiliakazam sovereign Bedlam's speech just now. Why? Do you not dare to admit it now? Admit it? So what if I admit it? Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Everyone was wary of you in the past because of your potential. If you really don't know what's good for you, I won't hold back. As you can see, I'm about to die due to my cataclysmic power. At a time like this, I definitely won't have any reservations. So what are you trying to say? You want me to hand over some small Kiliakazam origin? Lin Feng's expression gradually turned cold as well. If they threatened and robbed others without restraint just because the epical cataclysm was arriving, wouldn't the entire medium Kiliakazam be plunged into chaos long ago? Moreover, he was targeting Lin Feng's Chaos Dojo. Lin Feng naturally would not hold back. That's right. Hand over some of the small Kiliakazam origin, and I can leave the Chaos Dojo alone. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. At this point, Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam no longer had any reservations. He simply made the threat openly. Lin Feng sneered instead. Good, Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam. Didn't you just say that I've never killed a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign? That's just as well. You'll become the first 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign I kill. Lin Feng's gaze was cold and filled with killing intent. You want to kill me? You really don't know your place. I'm a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. Don't think that I'm comparable to those 4 Cataclysm and 5 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns you've killed. If you want to kill me, I'll make you suffer first. Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam was furious. He knew that Lin Feng possessed the principle of spacetime, so it was almost impossible for him to kill Lin Feng. Even a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign probably could not do it. However, he was also a proud 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. How could he not be furious after Lin Feng publicly announced that he would kill him? Hence, the furious Kiliakazam sovereign Bedlam immediately mobilized his small Kiliakazam. The small Kiliakazam of a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign had already expanded to the extreme. It was almost one of the strongest small Kiliakazams below the overlords. Just the small Kiliakazam alone was enough to defeat and suppress everything. In fact, it could shatter the small Kiliakazam of a 5 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign with a collision. No wonder Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam was so confident. He did have the right to be confident. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. He also wanted to see how strong his small Kiliakazam was after surviving the 6th epical cataclysm. It had to be known that all along, the foundation of Lin Feng's small Kiliakazam had actually been slightly deeper than that of the other Kiliakazam sovereigns. Hence, he was not afraid of direct collision with the small Kiliakazam. Seeing that Lin Feng had actually mobilized his small Kiliakazam as well, and wanted to clash head-on with Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam, Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam was overjoyed. At the same time, the killing intent in his heart intensified. Boom! Finally, their small Kiliakazams collided violently. Immediately, the small Kiliakazam powers intertwined continuously. How terrifying was the shockwave from the collision between 2 small Kiliakazams. Originally, Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam still had the strength to take care of the Bedlam Dojo. However, as it collided with Lin Feng's small Kiliakazam, a power that was not inferior to his was immediately unleashed from the small Kiliakazam, causing Kiliakazam's sovereign Bedlam's entire body to shake. Disbelief even appeared in his eyes. You're a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam could not believe it. A six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. How was this possible? It had to be known that Lin Feng had only become a five-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign for a short period of time. It might only be 10,000 years. Was it possible that in 10,000 years, he had survived the sixth epochal cataclysm and become a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? However, at the thought of Lin Feng, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam felt as if he was stuck. He felt very uncomfortable. Perhaps Lin Feng was really a special case. How long had Lin Feng actually stayed in the medium Kiliakosm from the time he became a one-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign until now? It had only been a little more than an epoch. However, before this, Lin Feng was already a five-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Was it that strange for him to become a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign after 10,000 years? This scene was also seen by the three pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns of the Bedlam Dojo, and even Kiliakosm sovereigns who had even sensed the changes here. Without exception, great shock surged through the depths of their hearts. Six-cataclysm. He's actually gone on to become a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. This is already a legend. Even a legend can't describe it. Even the three great medium Kiliakosm sovereigns are far inferior to the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereigns in terms of how fast they cultivate. Isn't he afraid of the epochal cataclysm? What can the epochal cataclysm do? The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign killed so many Kiliakosm sovereigns. How many small Kiliakosms did he obtain? How much small Kiliakosm origin did he obtain over time? Wouldn't surviving the sixth epochal cataclysm be a piece of cake for him? He's already a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign now. How far can he be from reaching seven cataclysm? Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam is probably doomed this time. The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign usually doesn't take the initiative to cause trouble, but he definitely won't tolerate people who threaten the Chaos Dojo. Even if Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam went berserk, why did he have to provoke the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign of all people? Many Kiliakosm sovereigns shook their heads. They did not like Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam either, but the cultivation speed of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign Lin Feng still shocked them. How could they not be shocked to see that he's become a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign in such a short period of time? At this moment, in the Bedlam Dojo, the two small Kiliakosms collided continuously, almost destroying more than half of the Bedlam Dojo. However, neither could do anything to the other. Although Lin Feng's small Kiliakosm did have some advantages, it was far from overwhelming. Hence, he could not defeat Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam in a short period of time. On the other hand, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam was very aggrieved, and even furious. Wasn't his identity as a six-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign what he was proud of? Even against Lin Feng, he was only wary of Lin Feng's principle of spacetime, and not of Lin Feng's own cultivation level. But now, Lin Feng's own cultivation level was not inferior to his at all. How could Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam still maintain his composure? Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, if you won't let me live, I'll take you with me. Ha ha ha. Epochal cataclysm, descend. At this point, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam no longer had any reservations. He had gone completely insane. Boom. In the next moment, the destructive power in Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam's body gathered all the cataclysmic power, forming a new power. That was the power of the epochal cataclysm. Vast cataclysmic power surged over, ready to annihilate and destroy everything. No power could resist it. This was the epochal cataclysm, and the most terrifying seventh epochal cataclysm at that. This is bad. Even Lin Feng's expression changed at this moment. This was the seventh epochal cataclysm. Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam had gone completely insane, triggering the seventh epochal cataclysm in advance. Originally, Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam was already in a state plagued by cataclysmic power. Once he went insane, he could trigger the arrival of the epochal cataclysm in advance at any time. This was also why no one dared to provoke those Kiliakosm sovereigns plagued by cataclysmic power. It was because these Chiliocosm sovereigns could trigger the epical cataclysm at any time. Once one was tainted by the cataclysmic power, it might trigger the epical cataclysm in their own internal small Chiliocosm. At that time, they would really perish together. The gains would not make up for the losses. Lin Feng's expression changed drastically. Actually, he was not afraid that the cataclysmic power would trigger the epical cataclysm in his body. It was that the ferociously approaching seventh epical cataclysm was even more terrifying than he had imagined. No matter how the other Chiliocosm sovereigns described the seventh epical cataclysm, deep down, Lin Feng still did not think much of it, although he said that he took it very seriously. However, everything went very smoothly for him from the first epical cataclysm to the sixth. However, now that he had personally witnessed the seventh epical cataclysm, he saw clearly that the core power of Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam could not resist the tide of the seventh epical cataclysm at all. He was instantly reduced to ashes. In fact, even Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam's small Chiliocosm could not hold out for more than the span of a breath before being reduced to ashes. Moreover, surging cataclysmic power spewed out and swept towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng was not far from Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam, and was even rather close. Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam committed this action with the intention of perishing together with Lin Feng. His motive was incomparably vicious. However, at a life-or-death moment, how could he hesitate at all? At this moment, it was too late for Lin Feng to leave. He had to face the surging cataclysmic power of the seventh epical cataclysm head-on. Fortunately, it was not all the cataclysmic power, only a small portion. River of Spacetime. At the critical moment, Lin Feng unleashed the River of Spacetime directly. It enveloped him from above, sweeping all this surging cataclysmic power into the River of Spacetime. The cataclysmic power was indeed one of the most terrifying powers in existence. It could destroy all the rules in the small Chiliocosm. Hence, powers like rules could not stop the cataclysmic power at all. Only the small Chiliocosm origin might be able to contend with a little cataclysmic power, but it was not actually contending. It was restoring the small Chiliocosm that had been damaged by the cataclysmic power. This way, how terrifying was the cataclysmic power? It could be considered the most terrifying power in existence. However, the power of spacetime transcended all and surpassed all. Above all rules and power, it was the most mysterious, miraculous, and majestic power. Lin Feng happened to control the power of spacetime. If it were the complete seventh epical cataclysm, Lin Feng definitely would not be able to deal with it even if he had the power of spacetime. It was not that the power of spacetime could not deal with it, but that Lin Feng's internal small Chiliocosm could not withstand it. The cataclysmic power was so strong. Although it could not destroy the spacetime power, the spacetime power still required a huge amount of energy to completely eliminate the cataclysmic power. Hence, Lin Feng's small Chiliocosm was enduring a huge burden. Fortunately, he only had a portion of the cataclysmic power. As Lin Feng used the River of Spacetime, in addition to the fact that he was already a 6 cataclysm Chiliocosm sovereign, his internal small Chiliocosm also advanced by leaps and bounds, enhanced by more than 100-fold. Hence, Lin Feng did not have to bear much of a burden to defuse this cataclysmic power. As the cataclysmic power dissipated, the void returned to calm. However, Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam was already dead. The fall of a dignified 6 cataclysm Chiliocosm sovereign was an absolutely major matter, even in the vast medium Chiliocosm. It was enough to shake the entire medium Chiliocosm. Moreover, it was impossible for no one to know about such a huge commotion. However, when those spying Chiliocosm sovereigns saw this scene, all of them fell silent. It was not that they were not shocked. On the contrary, they were very shocked. However, when they saw that it was the Chaos Chiliocosm sovereign Lin Feng, they were all used to it. Every time the Chaos Chiliocosm sovereign appeared, there would definitely be conflict, killings, and the deaths of Chiliocosm sovereigns. From a 1 cataclysm Chiliocosm sovereign to a 2 cataclysm, 3 cataclysm, 4 cataclysm, 5 cataclysm, and even 6 cataclysm Chiliocosm sovereign, he had always followed this pattern. Lin Feng would definitely kill powerful Chiliocosm sovereigns. This time, the unlucky Chiliocosm sovereign Bedlam was killed by Lin Feng. 90% of the Bedlam dojo had also been destroyed by the shockwave from the battle between the two of them, and perhaps only 10% was left. However, Lin Feng did not care. It was just a dojo. So long as not everyone was dead, it was good enough. The most important thing about the dojo was the exact coordinates of the small kiliocosms under its command. As long as someone knew, it would not be a big deal even if the entire dojo was destroyed. Lin Feng glanced at the void. He believed that no one would dare to provoke the Chaos Dojo again. He had not killed an ordinary kiliocosm sovereign this time, but a 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. In a situation where 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns could not attack casually, 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns were almost the top entities, and the strongest individuals below the overlords. Even so, kiliocosm sovereign Bedlam was still suppressed by Lin Feng. He had even triggered the epical cataclysm in advance, but still could not do anything to Lin Feng. As for perishing together, that was even more of a joke. Many kiliocosm sovereigns knew very well that the momentum of the chaos kiliocosm sovereign, Lin Feng, had already been established. Until Lin Feng underwent the 7th epical cataclysm, no one would dare to provoke him anymore. Lin Feng's reputation would also truly spread throughout the entire medium kiliocosm, and he would become the strongest hegemon without equal. In fact, by relying on the wonders of the principle of spacetime, he could even be comparable to some 7 cataclysm overlords. Swoosh! Lin Feng immediately flew to the Bedlam dojo below. Many 3-star supremacies of the Bedlam dojo were relatively lucky and survived. When they saw Lin Feng arrive, they hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign." These 3-star supremacies did not have the slightest influence on the greater picture and could not affect it. Basically, as long as the Kiliocosm Sovereign was defeated, these 3-star supremacies would all submit. Who can tell me how many small kiliocosms the Bedlam dojo controls? Lin Feng asked the question he was most concerned about directly. Your Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign, there are a total of more than 19,700 small kiliocosms in our Bedlam dojo, close to 20,000. Close to 20,000 small kiliocosms? Lin Feng was slightly stunned. It was not that there were too few, but that there were too many. There were so many that Lin Feng was not even prepared. With 20 small kiliocosms, he could obtain more than 4,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin in an epoch. However, on careful thought, what was the use of 4,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin? Usually, an ordinary 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign would need at least 15,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin to survive the 7th epical cataclysm. Hence, just 4,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin was a drop in the bucket. As for kiliocosm sovereign Bedlam, he could already be considered one of the best among 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. In other words, the small kiliocosms he controlled were already far more than ordinary 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. Even so, it was still a fool's dream for him to survive the 7th epical cataclysm. It was enough to show how difficult the 7th epical cataclysm was. It was an insurmountable chasm that stood in front of all the 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. In that case, I roughly control 30,000 small kiliocosms now? Lin Feng calculated carefully. In the past, he had more than 11,000 small kiliocosms. Now, with the addition of the small kiliocosms of the Bedlam dojo, there were indeed 30,000 small kiliocosms. In the past, this would have been unimaginable. He actually had a total of 30,000 small kiliocosms. According to the rate of an average of 1 complete portion of small kiliocosm origin per epoch, 30,000 small kiliocosm could provide Lin Feng with at least 6,000 complete portions of small kiliocosm origin in an epoch. This was already quite good, but if Lin Feng wanted to survive the 7th epical cataclysm with his spacetime physique, he would need at least over 20,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin. It was still a drop in the bucket. In other words, if Lin Feng did not obtain a large amount of small kiliocosm origin from the Troll Forbidden Zone, if he wanted to survive the 7th epical cataclysm, he would still have to work hard to plunder small kiliocosm origin in the future. However, Lin Feng still had about 23,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin left. In an epoch, even if he did nothing and obtained 6,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin, that would be a total of 29 portions of small kiliocosm origin. That was close to 30 portions of small kiliocosm origin. No matter what, the 7th epochal cataclysm should not be much of a problem. He could survive it safely. If other kiliocosm sovereigns knew that Lin Feng, who had just become a 6th cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign, actually possessed the small kiliocosm origin needed to survive the 7th epochal cataclysm, there was no knowing how insane they would become. In fact, no matter how dangerous it was, there would probably be people who would take the risk and think of ways to seize the small kiliocosm origin from Lin Feng. Hence, Lin Feng never revealed the small kiliocosm origin he had. Even the number of small kiliocosms under his command was kept strictly confidential. Only the pseudo-kiliocosm sovereigns and very few supremacies knew the rough number of small kiliocosms the Chaos Dojo currently controlled. But they only had a rough idea as well. Lin Feng himself knew the actual number the best. However, Lin Feng was not complacent. In fact, he was not planning to accelerate time this time. He still needed to make good use of this epoch to accumulate more small kiliocosm origin. He realized that it seemed like just accumulating small kiliocosms was no longer enough to satisfy his need for small kiliocosm origin. Even if he could rely on the small kiliocosm origin in the Troll Forbidden Zone to survive the 7th epochal cataclysm and become a 7 cataclysm overlord this time, what about the 8th epochal cataclysm? At that time, he would need even more small kiliocosm origin, and it would be an astronomical figure. Lin Feng would not be so lucky as to obtain so much small kiliocosm origin from a forbidden zone every time. Relying on the accumulated small kiliocosms alone was not enough to provide so much small kiliocosm origin at all. Hence, while there were still some 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns, there were really very few 8 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. Lin Feng thought about many things. Soon, the people from the Chaos Dojo also rushed over. Under Lin Feng's command, they began to take over the Bedlam Dojo. From then on, there was no longer a Bedlam Dojo in the medium kiliocosm. Kiliocosm sovereign Bedlam has fallen? In a distant and unknown space, the 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns seem to have been awakened by a huge commotion. The death of a 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign would definitely cause a violent tremor in the medium kiliocosm. Even the 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns could not miss it. It's the chaos kiliocosm sovereign again. He really knows how to cause trouble. He killed a 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign just like that. Are we giving him too much freedom? He should be restrained. After all, with his current strength, the threat he poses is actually not inferior to an ordinary 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. But back then, we only placed restrictions on 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. Moreover, it wasn't the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign who took the initiative to provoke Kiliocosm Sovereign Bedlam. It was Kiliocosm Sovereign Bedlam who delivered himself to our doorstep and coveted the Chaos Dojo. Under such circumstances, even the restricted 7 Cataclysm Kiliocosm Sovereigns can kill Kiliocosm Sovereign Bedlam. So, we really can't do anything to this young fellow? The 3 medium Kiliocosm Sovereigns looked at each other. They were high and mighty, the dignified medium kiliocosm sovereigns, supreme entities. Even in the medium kiliocosm, they were basically the juggernauts. Their word was the rule. No one could disobey them. However, there was nothing they could do about the appearance of this chaos kiliocosm sovereign. At the very least, with the rules they had established so far, there was really nothing they could do. Lin Feng was like a loophole in their rules. They could only make up for it, but there was nothing they could do now. Looks like we can't let this young fellow continue being so unrestrained. Otherwise, if he really takes the initiative to attack the other kiliocosm sovereigns, what should we do? That's right. We do have to place him under some restrictions. However, the rules can't be changed lightly. If even the 6 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns are restrained and require limitations, the kiliocosm sovereigns will have even less motivation to compete to improve. I think we can do something at the Myriad Origin Conference. Myriad Origin Conference? You want to invite the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign? That's right. We're inviting him. Once he goes to the Myriad Origin Conference, his status will be different. Moreover, with his current strength, he can actually more or less be considered a 7-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. This young fellow really got lucky then. He swept through the troll forbidden zone and obtained a lot of small Kiliakosm origin. At the very least, it won't be a problem for him to survive the 7th epical cataclysm. If he gains something at the Myriad Origin Conference, won't he have a chance to survive the 8th epical cataclysm? Isn't this what we want to see? However, an opportunity is just an opportunity. Whether he can seize it still depends on himself. Moreover, the Myriad Origin Conference is filled with 7 cataclysm and even 8 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. What advantage do you think this young fellow can gain among them? That's true. There's less than 100 million years left until the Myriad Origin Conference. I hope some Kiliakosm sovereigns that impress us can appear this time. I hope so. The 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns conversed in low voices for a while, before falling completely silent again. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, billions of years had gone by. The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign Lin Feng was famous now. Even 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns had to treat him with caution. The current Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign was publicly recognized as the #1 hegemon in the medium Kiliakosm, the strongest person below 7 Cataclysm overlords. Some people even felt that Lin Feng could already contend with 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns now. Of course, Lin Feng would not take the initiative to provoke 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Similarly, the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns would not take the initiative to provoke Lin Feng. Both parties did not care about these empty titles at all. Which 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign would not be working hard to plunder small Kiliakosm origin? Even Lin Feng had been trying his best to obtain more small Kiliakosm origin over trillions of years. Unfortunately, he found almost nothing. He had only acquired some more small Kiliakosms. Lin Feng was even getting worried. After this epoch, he could survive the 7th epical cataclysm, but what about the 8th epical cataclysm? Just by relying on slow accumulation, he would never be able to survive the 8th epical cataclysm. Your Majesty, Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light is here to visit. Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light? Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He was not a nobody now. Normally, Kiliakosm Sovereign Epoch would not report about 5 Cataclysm or even 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns, because Lin Feng had long given the order to turn away all guests. However, Lin Feng could not refuse Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light. This was because he was a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, a true 7 Cataclysm Overlord. After so many years, Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light was the first 7 Cataclysm Overlord to visit Lin Feng. Welcome Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light inside. Lin Feng immediately got someone to invite Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light into the dojo, and he rushed to the hall of the dojo immediately. Soon, a tall Kiliakosm sovereign with an extremely rich aura that surpassed even Lin Feng's entered the hall. Moreover, Lin Feng immediately looked at him. Welcome, Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light. Excuse me for not coming out to welcome you in advance. Lin Feng was the first to speak. Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light naturally saw Lin Feng as well. Although Lin Feng did not go out to welcome him personally, with Lin Feng's current identity and status, he was almost no different from a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Hence, Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light naturally did not hold it against him. Moreover, Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light had come with a mission this time. It's said that the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign is extraordinary. Seeing you today, it's true. Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light was also sizing Lin Feng up carefully. It was also very difficult for him to believe that a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign could actually make such a name for himself, and a name so illustrious and ferocious at that. To a certain extent, even he, a dignified 7 Cataclysm overlord, was inferior. Lin Feng was also sizing up Kiliakosm Sovereign Rock Light. This was a 7 Cataclysm sovereign who had been famous for many years. Of course, his most famous identity was not actually a powerful 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, but a former follower of one of the 3 great medium Kiliakosm sovereigns, Kiliakosm Sovereign Mythical Tree. This was a Kiliakosm sovereign with a powerful background. May I know why Kiliakazam's sovereign rock light has come from afar? Lin Feng pondered for a moment and asked slowly. He knew that Kiliakazam's sovereign rock light would not visit unless there was a major matter. A dignified 7 Cataclysm overlord would not casually visit him. A 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. Even if Lin Feng was currently in the limelight, he could not attract a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign to come specially to visit. Hearing this, Kiliakazam's sovereign rock light smiled and said, Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. I'm indeed here for a matter. I'm under the orders of Kiliakazam's sovereign mythical tree to specially send Chaos Kiliakazam, sovereign, an invitation to the Myriad Origin Conference. With that, Kiliakazam's sovereign rock light waved his hand. A red light flashed, and something appeared in front of Lin Feng in the blink of an eye. Lin Feng reached out gently and grabbed it easily. It was an invitation letter with the location of the Myriad Origin Conference, and carried traces of a majestic aura. This aura far exceeded that of the small Kiliakazam sovereigns. Even those 7 Cataclysm and 8 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns did not have such a majestic aura. Only a medium Kiliakazam sovereign had such a majestic aura. It was impossible for him to be faking it. Myriad Origin Conference. Lin Feng had never heard of the Myriad Origin Conference. Of course, the fact that the medium Kiliakazam sovereigns personally sent out invitation letters for it was enough to show that this Myriad Origin Conference was not simple. As if he knew that Lin Feng knew very little about the Myriad Origin Conference, Kiliakazam Sovereign Rocklight explained, Chaos Kiliakazam Sovereign, you have yet to become a 7 Cataclysm Sovereign, and the time you've cultivated is relatively short. Hence, it's normal for you not to have heard of the Myriad Origin Conference. Invitations to the Myriad Origin Conference are personally sent by the 3 great medium Kiliakazam sovereigns. Only those above the 7 Cataclysm are qualified to participate. The venue of the Myriad Origin Conference is different every time. The 3 medium Kiliakazam sovereigns would determine the location. As the name Myriad Origin Conference indicates, the 3 medium Kiliakazam sovereigns would offer a reward of 100,000 complete portions of small Kiliakazam origin. As long as you get first place in the Myriad Origin Conference, you can obtain 100,000 portions of small Kiliakazam origin. What, 100,000 portions of small Kiliakazam origin? Lin Feng was extremely shocked. Even though he had already seen many grand scenes and was quite knowledgeable, the sight of 100,000 portions of small Kiliakazam origin at once was still extremely stunning. How terrifying was 100,000 portions of small Kiliakazam origin? Up until this point of Lin Feng's cultivation, the small Kiliakazam origin he had consumed to become a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign probably did not even reach 50,000 portions, let alone 100,000 portions. How generous was this? Only medium Kiliakazam sovereigns could easily take out 100,000 portions of small Kiliakazam origin. There's no need to be so surprised. You haven't become a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign yet, but since they've given you the invitation letter now, it means they've made an exception and invited you, treating you as the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. There's no harm in telling you some rules. Once you become a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign, there are actually some restrictions. For example, you can't attack Kiliakazam sovereigns below the 7 Cataclysm at will unless they offend you first. 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns are not allowed to fight among themselves in the medium Kiliakazam, and can only fight if they go to the void. These rules are actually to protect the Kiliakazam sovereigns below the 7 Cataclysm, and also to protect the medium Kiliakazam. Otherwise, with how powerful 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns are, the medium Kiliakazam would have long been torn apart, or even shattered. You also control small Kiliakazams, so you naturally know how difficult it is to obtain a portion of small Kiliakazam origin. How many portions of small Kiliakazam origin would the 8th epical cataclysm require? It would probably be more than 100,000 portions. The 8th epical cataclysm would be even more terrifying. If not for the Myriad Origin Conference, more than 99% of those 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns would have lost all hope. It's only due to the Myriad Origin Conference that we 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns have a trace of hope. But it's only a trace of hope. Lin Feng understood now. With Kiliakazam Sovereign Rock Light's explanation, he understood the goal of the Myriad Origin Conference. Perhaps it was related to some considerations of the 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns. However, one of the goals was actually to give those 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns some hope. The 8th epical cataclysm required a massive amount of small Kiliakosm origin, and even 100,000 portions of small Kiliakosm origin were not enough. However, if one obtained 100,000 portions of small Kiliakosm origin, the pressure would be greatly reduced. If one worked hard and strove for it, with enough time, they still had a chance of becoming an 8 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. As long as there was hope, people would not go insane. Of course, for every Myriad Origin Conference, there was also the possibility that no one could obtain the small Kiliakosm origin. Whether they could obtain it would depend on the opportunities of the Kiliakosm sovereigns. So, I was made an exception and invited? That's right. This is the affirmation the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns have for the chaos Kiliakosm sovereign. Lin Feng shook his head and smiled weakly. Is this an affirmation? This is clearly a restriction. If it's affirmation, the medium Kiliakosm sovereign wouldn't have sent me into a group of 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns to compete. Lin Feng might be the undisputed dominator below the 7 cataclysm, with strength even comparable to a 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. However, that was all. Among 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, Lin Feng would be rather ordinary. In fact, even relying on the principle of spacetime, he was only slightly below average among 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. There was not much chance of winning if he fought for the small Kiliakosm origin with such strength. Rather than affirmation, it was more like a restriction. This was because with this invitation letter, Lin Feng knew very well that he would lose his identity as a 6 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign from now on, and could not casually attack other Kiliakosm sovereigns below the 7 cataclysm. Otherwise, the 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns would have to implement the rules. It was obvious that Lin Feng's strength and performance had already broken the balance. The 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns could only maintain the balance this way, and Lin Feng had become the tragic sacrifice. However, even if he knew the reason, how could Lin Feng not accept this invitation letter? Looking at Kiliakosm sovereign Rocklight's half-M smile, Lin Feng knew that he had no right to refuse. I'll accept the invitation letter. After a long while, Lin Feng lifted his head and said slowly. At this point, he had no better solution. He could only accept the invitation letter first and take things one step at a time. Moreover, just as Kiliakosm sovereign Rocklight had said, this was also an opportunity. All right, Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign. See you at the conference then. Goodbye. Lin Feng had already accepted the invitation letter. So Kiliakosm sovereign Rocklight did not linger in the Chaos Dojo anymore. Instead, he quickly bade farewell and left. Looking at Kiliakosm sovereign Rocklight's departing back, Lin Feng fell silent. He was still holding the invitation letter in his hand. This was like a death warrant. It was a little hot in Lin Feng's hands, but he had no choice but to accept it. Lin Feng did not have the strength to resist the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns yet. So, the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns have indeed noticed me. Lin Feng looked at the invitation letter in his hand and muttered softly. Being noticed by the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns was not a good thing. Lin Feng had too many secrets, including the principle of spacetime, the troll, and so on. They were all secrets that even the medium Kiliakosm sovereigns did not have. Once he was noticed, these secrets of his might be exposed. However, he had already grown to the point where he was not inferior to a 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, and was known as the strongest person below the overlords. It was difficult for him not to be noticed. I have to increase my strength as soon as possible. Lin Feng felt a sense of urgency. Originally, he had wanted to take his time and pass an epoch slowly. During this period of time, he would accumulate more small Kiliakosms, or small Kiliakosm origin. However, Lin Feng realized that if he just relied on this slow accumulation, while surviving the 7th epochal cataclysm would not be a problem, the 8th epochal cataclysm would probably become a huge problem. If he worked hard at that time, he might not be able to find enough small Kiliakosm origin. But now the opportunity had come. At the Myriad Origin Conference, the three medium kiliocosm sovereigns would place 100,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin at the location they've set for the Myriad Origin Conference. It was not just those 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns who coveted it and went insane over it. Lin Feng was the same, even if 100,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin could not allow Lin Feng to survive the 8th epochal cataclysm. After all, if he could survive the 8th epochal cataclysm safely, he would have to at least prepare 10 times the amount of small kiliocosm origin required by the 7th epochal cataclysm. In other words, Lin Feng needed to prepare at least 200,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin. The other 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns also needed to prepare at least 150,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin. Hence, be it to Lin Feng or the other 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns, it was an indispensable wealth, even much more important than any supreme treasure. Moreover, there were not just 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns at the Myriad Origin Conference. There were even 8 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. It probably would not be so easy for Lin Feng to obtain the 100,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin. However, Lin Feng also had an advantage distinct from the other kiliocosm sovereigns. It was the principle of space-time. This time, for some reason, the 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns actually arranged for the Myriad Origin Conference to be held in the Beehive Forbidden Zone, known as the number 1 Forbidden Zone in the medium kiliocosm. Lin Feng had actually already explored 2 of the 10 forbidden zones of the medium kiliocosm. He had even indirectly destroyed a forbidden zone. None of these forbidden zones were simple. For example, the Troll Forbidden Zone had a mysterious air. If not for Lin Feng's principle of spacetime, he would probably be in danger as well. The top forbidden zone was even more terrifying. It was called the Beehive. The name sounded ordinary, but in reality, it was truly the most dangerous forbidden zone. Even the 7 cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns might never be able to come out after entering. As the name suggested, the entire forbidden zone was like a beehive. It was complicated inside, and there were some space-time wormholes that warped to places unknown. The reason Lin Feng felt that he would have some advantages in the Myriad Origin Conference was that it was set in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. This was a place that was related to space-time. The space-time wormholes inside were actually formed from the power of space-time. It even produced a special object called the Stones of Eternity. It was rumored that there was some space-time power contained in the Stones of Eternity. After obtaining the Stones of Eternity, one could take the opportunity to comprehend the principle of spacetime. In the past, when the Beehive Forbidden Zone was still very popular, countless kiliocosm sovereigns had entered it. However, very few of the kiliocosm sovereigns who entered came out. This was why it had the notorious reputation of being the number 1 forbidden zone in the medium kiliocosm. Very few kiliocosm sovereigns ventured into the Beehive Forbidden Zone anymore. Treasures that contain spacetime power? Looks like the 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns have deeper motives for setting the venue of the Myriad Origin Conference in the Beehive. Lin Feng was trying to figure out the goals of the 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns. Perhaps just like the Troll Forbidden Zone, the medium kiliocosm sovereigns deliberately allowed many lesser kiliocosm sovereigns into it to understand the true secrets of the Forbidden Zone. In the end, the people who ultimately benefited were the 3 great medium kiliocosm sovereigns. However, Lin Feng was actually also very interested in this miraculous Forbidden Zone. He had long wanted to venture into the Beehive Forbidden Zone. It was only because of the Beehive's notoriety as the top Forbidden Zone that he did not do so for a long time. He had a vague feeling that this Beehive Forbidden Zone might really be deeply related to his principle of spacetime. Entering it might allow him to obtain unexpected gains. The venue of the Myriad Origin Conference this time was in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Lin Feng did not need to make a special trip there in the future. Hence, if Lin Feng made use of the Beehive Forbidden Zone, it was not impossible for him to stand out among the many kiliocosm sovereigns above 7 cataclysm, and obtain 100,000 portions of small kiliocosm origin. He would only know the outcome after trying. Hence, Lin Feng looked at the exact time of the invitation letter. There was still 100 years before the Myriad Origin Conference. He could take his time to prepare. At the very least, he had to collect some information about the Myriad Origin Conference first. The medium Kiliakosm seemed to have calmed down for once. Be it those overlord-level Kiliakosm sovereigns above the Seven Cataclysm, or some hegemon-level Kiliakosm sovereigns, all of them seemed to have gone silent at the same time. No explosive events seemed to occur in the medium Kiliakosm anymore. Even the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, who was in the limelight, seemed to have become much more low-key. Some hegemon-level Kiliakosm sovereigns discreetly sensed that something was amiss. It was as if those Kiliakosm sovereigns above the Seven Cataclysm were secretly preparing for something. Not just one or two, but almost all the Seven Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were making preparations in secret. This could not help but make some hegemon-level Kiliakosm sovereigns guess if something major was happening. Only those Kiliakosm sovereigns above the Seven Cataclysm knew that the Myriad Origin Conference was approaching. This was their only hope. Even those Kiliakosm sovereigns plagued by cataclysmic power had calmed down at this moment and stopped going berserk. They were all secretly holding their breaths, preparing to amaze the world with a single feat by coming in first at the Myriad Origin Conference. Then they would obtain 100,000 portions of small Kiliakosm origin and survive the 8th epical cataclysm. For this, they were willing to do anything, even risk their lives. It's almost time. In the Chaos Dojo, Lin Feng opened his eyes, his expression a little unfathomable. He calculated the time. 100 years had passed. It was not that he had not done anything in the past 100 years. On the contrary, he had done a lot. The most important thing he did was to collect information on the Myriad Origin Conference and the Beehive Forbidden Zone. However, there was very little information on the Myriad Origin Conference, and very few people knew about it. Lin Feng asked about Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart and many other ancient Kiliakosm sovereigns, but almost all of them had never heard of it. Even if some had heard of it, they only had a rough idea of it and did not know much. They did not even know as much as Lin Feng. This was enough to show that the Myriad Origin Conference was only circulated in the circle of the Seven Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. As for those below the Seven Cataclysm, they had never heard of it at all. Moreover, it would be useless even if they heard of it. Those below the Seven Cataclysm could not enter. So what if they knew? On the other hand, Lin Feng had collected a lot of information about the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Lin Feng sorted out the information regarding the Beehive Forbidden Zone in detail. To Lin Feng's surprise, this Beehive Forbidden Zone was actually very ancient. It was so ancient that the Beehive Forbidden Zone had already appeared before the 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns became medium Kiliakosm sovereigns. No one could say for certain when the Beehive Forbidden Zone had appeared. They only knew that it was very ancient, even older than everyone had imagined. As soon as the Beehive Forbidden Zone appeared, many Kiliakosm sovereigns were attracted by its fame and went there. However, they never returned. Later, it was said that the 3 great medium Kiliakosm sovereigns also entered it. However, after they came out, they never spoke of it again. No one knew what they had encountered inside. Gradually, the Beehive Forbidden Zone became the first of the 10 forbidden zones in the medium Kiliakosm, and could be considered the most dangerous forbidden zone. This time, the 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns probably had a deeper motive for setting the Myriad Origin Conference in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Originally, Lin Feng had tried to obtain some Stones of Eternity. This was the only treasure in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. However, Stones of Eternity were very precious. Even if some were circulated previously, most of them were in the possession of 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Lin Feng tried collecting them for 100 years, to no avail. Otherwise, he might be able to see some clues from the Stones of Eternity. However, no matter how Lin Feng collected information, the time of the Myriad Origin Conference was approaching. In the end, he still had to make a trip to the Forbidden Beehive Zone personally. At that time, he would naturally know what mysteries were inside. It's time to set off. Lin Feng was already prepared for everything. Hence, the space-time power on his body flashed as he silently entered the space-time passage, warping towards the distant Beehive Forbidden Zone. A 4 Cataclysm Hegemon and 2 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were flying towards the Beehive Forbidden Zone. The epical cataclysm was imminent for all of them, and they were even plagued by cataclysmic power. They had already ventured into some forbidden zones. Although they did not encounter much danger, they found nothing. Hence, they became anxious. The three Kiliakosm sovereigns decided to head to the Beehive Forbidden Zone, not for the small Kiliakosm origin inside, but for the Stones of Eternity, which could be used to exchange for some small Kiliakosm origin. In fact, some 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were willing to exchange small Kiliakosms for the Stones of Eternity. However, the Beehive Forbidden Zone was just too dangerous. No one was willing to venture into the Beehive Forbidden Zone unless they had no choice. If they were not careful, they might remain in the Beehive Forbidden Zone forever. If not for the fact that they were plagued by cataclysmic power and at the end of their rope, these 3 Kiliakosm sovereigns would not have headed to the Beehive Forbidden Zone. However, they were at their wits' end now, so they could only take the risk and give it a try. We're here. The Beehive Forbidden Zone is ahead. Finally, the 3 Kiliakosm sovereigns reached the Beehive Forbidden Zone. There was a huge beehive-like mass stretching across the void in front of them. That was the Beehive Forbidden Zone. The Beehive Forbidden Zone had not changed at all over countless years. However, once one entered it, it would be very difficult for anyone below the 7 Cataclysm to come out. Even a Kiliakosm sovereign above the 7 Cataclysm might fall in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon. Why do I feel that something is amiss? Suddenly, one of the 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns jolted, as if he had sensed something. The core power of his small Kiliakosm was not offensive, defensive, or any supreme treasure. Instead, it was a type of mental power that could predict some dangers. It was precisely because of this miraculous power that they could roam the forbidden zones a few times and emerge safe and sound. If not for this miraculous power, how could Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon, a dignified 4 Cataclysm magnate, bring 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns like them along? Amiss? What can be amiss? Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon looked towards Beehive Forbidden Zone. There did not seem to be any changes. The Beehive Forbidden Zone is the top of the 10 forbidden zones to begin with. There are many dangers inside. You can predict danger, so that is to be expected. However, we no longer have a choice. We can only take the risk and venture into the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon gritted his teeth. In the end, he still decided to continue heading to the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Usually, he would have listened to the other party's opinion. After all, the other party could predict danger. Many times, this ability had saved their lives. However, this time, Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon had no choice but to grit his teeth. He had to take the risk. They no longer had a choice. They could only enter the Beehive Forbidden Zone and take a gamble. Otherwise, they could only wait until the epical cataclysm descended and reduced all of them to ashes. Swoosh! Hence, the 3 of them sped up and quickly approached the Beehive Forbidden Zone. However, the closer they got, the clearer the 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns' sense of danger became. In fact, in the end, the entire body of the 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign was shaking, as if he would die immediately if they kept going forward. No, we can't continue advancing. If this really continues, we may fall immediately. Kiliakosm's Sovereign Stone Dragon frowned and said, "We haven't even entered the Beehive Forbidden Zone. How can there be danger? My senses can't be wrong. The danger doesn't come from the Beehive Forbidden Zone, but from outside." Danger from outside the Forbidden Zone? Kiliakosm's Sovereign Stone Dragon seemed to have sensed something and suddenly lifted his head. He saw that there were actually people outside the Beehive Forbidden Zone, and there were not just 1 or 2 of them. However, he could not sense them no matter what previously, and could only see them with the naked eye. These people, Kiliakosm's Sovereign Stone Dragon suddenly felt terrified. He had never seen these people, nor did he know them. Although they did not emit any aura, every one of them seemed to exude a terrifying pressure. Swoosh! One of them lifted his head and opened his eyes, looking at Kiliakosm's Sovereign Stone Dragon. Boom! In the next moment, Kiliakosm's Sovereign Stone Dragon felt as if he had suffered a heavy blow. His entire body stiffened, and he broke out in a cold sweat. 7 Cataclysm Overlord. Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon was a little confused. 7 Cataclysm. They were all 7 Cataclysm sovereigns, and they were all gathered outside the Beehive Forbidden Zone. What were they trying to do? Join forces to explore the Beehive Forbidden Zone? Get lost! One of the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns snorted coldly. Immediately, the bodies of Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon and the other 2 Kiliakosm sovereigns shook, as if they were under immense pressure. Even if a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign just intimidated with their aura, it was far from what mere 4 Cataclysm and 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns could withstand. Buzz. At this moment, a mighty river of light appeared in the void. A figure stepped out and gently reached out to support the 3 Kiliakosm sovereigns. Hurry up and leave this place. You should not linger around here. A calm voice entered the ears of Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon and the other 2 Kiliakosm sovereigns. At the same time, feeling as if they were unable to control themselves, the 3 of them were directly moved far away from the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon knew that this mysterious Kiliakosm sovereign had saved them, because just now, they really seemed to have sensed the aura of death. However, when Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon caught a glimpse of this unfamiliar Kiliakosm sovereign, his heart skipped a beat. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. It's the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign Lin Feng. However, although Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon was already far away, his voice echoed in everyone's ears. Ha! As soon as he opened his eyes, the 7 Cataclysm Overlord who had intimidated Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon with his gaze just now narrowed his eyes slightly and stared coldly at Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng seemed to turn a blind eye and paid no heed to it at all. Everyone had already heard what Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon had said just now. Actually, even if Kiliakosm Sovereign Stone Dragon had not said it, they all knew. With the insight of the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, how could they not tell that Lin Feng had used the power of spacetime to warp over just now? Among the current small Kiliakosm sovereigns, only the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, Lin Feng, controlled the power of spacetime. Isn't the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign a 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign? Why is he here at the Myriad Origin Conference as well? The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign did not come here just to enter the Beehive Forbidden Zone. I heard that Kiliakosm Sovereign Rocklight personally sent a letter to the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. It was specially approved by the 3 medium Kiliakosm sovereigns. They made an exception and added the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign to the guest list for this Myriad Origin Conference. A 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign is acting with us. Although many 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns did not say it explicitly, their gazes were a little hostile. However, there were still some Kiliakosm sovereigns whose expressions were very calm, as if they did not care about Lin Feng at all. It seemed like whether he was a 6 Cataclysm or 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, it did not have anything to do with them. On the other hand, Lin Feng appeared very calm. His gaze swept across the many Kiliakosm sovereigns, but he did not see anyone familiar. Actually, when it came to 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, Lin Feng had only seen Kiliakosm Sovereign Rocklight and Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star. He had even fought with Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star, which indirectly led to the death of Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star. Hence, these 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were not that miraculous. Lin Feng was only estimating the number of 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. With a cursory glance, he realized that the number of 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns was considerable. There were at least 100 of them. Moreover, there were still many Kiliakosm sovereigns who had yet to arrive. Once they arrived, there would probably be more than 200 of them. How terrifying were 207 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Even if only 1% of the Kiliakosm sovereigns had a chance of becoming 8 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, there would still be at least 2 or even 3 8 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Once they became 8 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, there was really nothing to be wary about. Everything in the past had nothing to do with them. Their only goal was to survive the 9th epical cataclysm and become medium Kiliakosm sovereigns. However, basically all the 8 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns over the years had failed. They all fell to the 9th epical cataclysm. Seeing so many Kiliacosm sovereigns above the 7 Cataclysm, it was enough to show how important these 100,000 portions of small Kiliacosm origin were to these Kiliacosm sovereigns. They were also very important to Lin Feng. Still, Lin Feng was very curious. Where did these 100,000 portions of small Kiliacosm origin come from? Even for medium Kiliacosm sovereigns, even if they were not affected by the epical cataclysm and were not afraid of cataclysmic power, just finding countless small Kiliacosms was not that easy. They had to collect them one by one, which was even harder. However, no one seemed to delve into where all the small Kiliacosm origin came from. To the 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, obtaining small Kiliacosm origin was their only goal. Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign, you're being a little too meddling. I just wanted to tease the 3 Kiliacosm sovereigns just now. Why did it offend the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign? Or do you think that we 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns are only SOSO? You could lead to the fall of Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star, so you don't take us seriously. Suddenly, a sharp voice echoed in his ears. Lin Feng looked over. It was the 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign who had intimidated Kiliacosm sovereign Stone Dragon and the others with his gaze just now. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew very little about 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. It could not be said that he knew nothing about them at all. But 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns rarely appeared in front of everyone. They were very low-key. If one was not in the circle of the 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, it would probably be very difficult to know the exact situation of most of the 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. Lin Feng did not know anything about this Kiliacosm sovereign. He did not even know his name. How should I address you, Kiliacosm sovereign? Lin Feng said indifferently instead of responding directly. My name is Submergence. So it's the Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence. When had I not taken 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns seriously? Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence, you've wronged me. Wronged you? Heh, with the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign's abilities, even Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star can't do anything to you. Even the Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star has fallen. How can you say that I've wronged you? Oh? Looks like Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence is a good friend of Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star. Why? Do you want to stand up for Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star? I don't mind. If Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence doesn't want to enter the Beehive Forbidden Zone now, you can stand up for the Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star and kill me. How about that? Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. His gaze turned cold, and there was no longer any politeness in his tone. So what if he was a 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign? Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence was alone, yet he dared to look down on Lin Feng and lecture him. How could Lin Feng show weakness? Moreover, there were so many 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns here. If he really showed weakness, it would probably be even more difficult for him to enter the Beehive Forbidden Zone. You? A look of anger appeared on the Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence face. He really wanted to attack now, but he knew that after entering the Beehive Forbidden Zone later, the competition would be much greater. Attacking now was tantamount to giving the other Kiliacosm sovereigns a chance. Humph, after I obtain the 100,000 portions of small Kiliacosm origin, I'll naturally seek guidance from the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. Is that so? I'm afraid you won't have the chance anymore. Do you want to try my river of spacetime? Lin Feng's gaze became colder and colder, and his body emitted a cold killing intent. He was the 6th Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign who had been made an exception and invited to participate in the Myriad Origin Conference this time. He did not want to just be a spectator. He was also ambitious and had some ideas. If he was targeted now, wouldn't it be even harder to do anything in the Beehive Forbidden Zone? If possible, Lin Feng really wanted to attack now. He wanted to fight a 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign for real openly. He wanted to see if he could really challenge a 7 Cataclysm overlord above his level. Kiliacosm sovereign Submergence did not say anything else. There was no point in arguing now, but he did secretly hold a grudge against Lin Feng. If he came across the opportunity in the Beehive Forbidden Zone, he definitely would not hold back. The 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns were only wary of Lin Feng's potential. However, they were not afraid of the current Lin Feng at all. At most, they would treat him as an equal. Right now, they were all 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. If they did not obtain enough small Kiliacosm origin after an epoch, they would not be able to survive the epical cataclysm, and would naturally die. Why would they be wary of Lin Feng? If one had enough small Kiliacosm origin, they could even become an 8 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign in one leap. They would be a true candidate for becoming a medium Kiliacosm sovereign. Once they survived the 9th epical cataclysm, they would be a medium Kiliacosm sovereign. No matter how great Lin Feng's potential was, he would not be taken seriously by the 8 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. Hence, the Kiliacosm sovereigns who were participating in the Myriad Origin Conference this time were all 7 Cataclysm overlords. No one would be wary of Lin Feng. Most of them treated him normally, and only treated him as an ordinary 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. However, there were also some people who harbored malice towards Lin Feng for various reasons. For example, Kiliacosm Sovereign Submergence was already motivated to kill, and was prepared to find an opportunity to kill Lin Feng in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Even if he could not kill him, he had to teach Lin Feng a lesson. Time passed slowly. Finally, the time for the Myriad Origin Conference arrived. Boom! Suddenly, the Beehive Forbidden Zone shook violently. Right on the heels of that, huge holes appeared in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. They were like doors, emitting a mysterious and deep aura. The Beehive Forbidden Zone has been opened, and the Myriad Origin Conference has begun. Success or failure will depend on this attempt. Time to go in. If I act first, my chances might be a bit higher. Seeing the opening of the Beehive Forbidden Zone, many 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns could no longer hold it in. They began to fly into the holes one after another and disappeared without a trace. Beehive Forbidden Zone. Lin Feng was not excited, nor did he head to the Beehive Forbidden Zone immediately. He only stared blankly at the huge holes, but he was extremely shocked. The power of spacetime. Lin Feng actually sensed traces of the power of spacetime in those holes. Although they were very weak, they were incomparably pure, pointing straight to the essence of spacetime. Lin Feng's principle of spacetime was comprehended through a freak combination of factors and various opportunities, when he came into contact with the spacetime gate and the spacetime imprint left behind by the mysterious wayfarer of spacetime, Dawn. Apart from those, Lin Feng had never come into contact with other spacetime power or items that contained spacetime power. Now, Lin Feng had finally seen it for the first time. Apart from him, there were other places and items with the power of spacetime. Those holes should be the legendary spacetime wormholes in the Beehive Forbidden Zone. Anyone who entered the spacetime wormholes would enter the Beehive Forbidden Zone. However, no one could say for certain where they would arrive. After all, the Beehive Forbidden Zone was infinitely huge, even larger than hundreds of small Kiliacosms. Seeing that more and more 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns had already entered, Lin Feng took a deep breath and flew towards a certain spacetime wormhole. Buzz. When Lin Feng entered the spacetime wormhole, he immediately felt as if he was in the river of spacetime. He could even see his past. Those scenes were his past. Reflecting the past. This is the essence of spacetime. Although Lin Feng had understood the principle of spacetime, he had actually only roughly grasped it. He did not even have the chance to study it in depth. Comprehension of the principle of spacetime was very difficult. Every little bit of improvement depended on one's opportunities. Lin Feng had yet to master the principle of spacetime to the level where it could reflect the past. Apart from reflecting the past, there was also extending to the future. These all fell under the principle of spacetime. The essence of the principle of spacetime was actually to sever the past and the future, making the true self the one and only. Only then would it be true eternity. For a moment, many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. After he entered the spacetime wormhole in the Beehive Forbidden Zone, he absorbed some of the essence of the principle of spacetime in the spacetime wormhole like a sponge. He even tried to mobilize his spacetime power and integrate it into the spacetime wormhole. Boom! It actually worked. Lin Feng's spacetime power easily fused into the spacetime wormhole. At the same time, countless spacetime wormholes seemed to appear in his mind at once. He even knew the situation in the spacetime wormhole clearly. This was because the entire Beehive Forbidden Zone was actually connected. Every spacetime wormhole was independent and interconnected. Lin Feng used the power of spacetime to grasp the situation of all the wormholes clearly at once. Lin Feng saw that these spatial wormholes teleported many Kiliacosm sovereigns into different spaces. Some of these spaces were very desolate and empty, but some were filled with life and powerful life forms at that. They even had an aura similar to that of the troll. Of course, Lin Feng could only see them and could not interfere with the operation of the spacetime wormholes. There seemed to be an even stronger spacetime power controlling the spacetime wormholes in the entire Beehive Forbidden Zone. Swoosh! The next moment, Lin Feng was also teleported to an unfamiliar space. In this space, as soon as Lin Feng descended, he immediately sensed a violent threat. Boom! It was as if the world was shaking. An incomparably huge behemoth actually bit towards Lin Feng. There seemed to be a suction force from its mouth pulling Lin Feng towards it forcefully. For a moment, Lin Feng actually could not break free. Small Kiliacosm. Without hesitation, Lin Feng immediately unleashed the small Kiliacosm. At once, his massive small Kiliacosm smashed hard towards the behemoth. Boom! The small Kiliacosm of a 6 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign, especially Lin Feng's small Kiliacosm, was terrifying to the extreme. It was even larger than the small Kiliacosm of ordinary 6 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. Hence, the power of a smash was also very terrifying. It was like a meteor smashing into a planet, sending the behemoth flying and landing hard on the ground. However, the behemoth only shook its head and quickly stood up. It seemed to be completely uninjured. Lin Feng's expression turned solemn. Just as he was considering whether to use the river of spacetime, the troll in his body suddenly said, "Home. It's the aura of home. This is a kind of worm from my homeland. A worm. How did it come to the medium Kiliacosm too?" The troll only had a mass of consciousness left now. Lin Feng could casually use a little small Kiliacosm power to reconstruct its body. Of course, the troll that had reconstructed its body did not actually have much combat power either. Who would have thought that such a tiny thing was actually a troll? What? This is a worm from your homeland. Lin Feng looked at the troll, then at the incomparably behemoth. No matter how he looked at it, it did not look like a worm. How could there be such a huge and ferocious worm? Even ordinary 6 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns might not be a match for this worm. Bang, bang, bang. Lin Feng used the small Kiliacosm again and sent this huge worm flying, smashing it hard onto the ground. However, no matter how Lin Feng attacked or exerted force, he could not kill this worm. It seemed to have some kind of undying characteristic just like the troll. Doesn't the worm have any weaknesses for killing it quickly? Lin Feng frowned and looked at the still lively worm, feeling a little helpless. In reality, he had already realized that this worm was quite strong. It was at least comparable to an ordinary 6 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign, but it was definitely far inferior to Lin Feng. Even without using the power of spacetime, the worm was not Lin Feng's match. Lin Feng could almost trounce this huge worm completely. However, there was one thing. The huge worm was almost undying. No matter how Lin Feng attacked, it seemed like the worm would not die. There was not even a single wound, and its strength had not even diminished. This undying characteristic really made one feel helpless. Even many 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns might be entangled by the worm if they encountered it. Of course, it was impossible to wear down a 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign to death. The 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign was stronger, and could easily suppress such a worm. Weakness. The troll thought for a moment and replied, "In my homeland, such worms can be seen everywhere. Even my true form can easily stomp such worms to death. It seemed like in my homeland, after we stomped the worms to death, they would die completely. Stomp them to death casually. Lin Feng opened his mouth, but hesitated in the end and did not continue asking. He had already vaguely guessed that perhaps only lifeforms in the origin realm could kill lifeforms in the origin realm. For example, trolls could easily kill worms. In the origin realm, these worms were just ordinary worms that could be stomped to death by trolls at will. However, in the medium chiliocosm, these worms, which could be casually stomped to death and could be seen everywhere in the origin realm, had all become terrifying undying monsters. In the beehive forbidden zone, they were even more difficult to deal with? Do you know this beehive forbidden zone? Lin Feng asked the troll directly. Beehive forbidden zone? I don't think I've heard of it in my homeland. Moreover, this place contains the power of spacetime. Even in my hometown, the number of people who can master the power of spacetime can be counted on one hand. Lin Feng nodded. He speculated that the troll's hometown was the origin realm. However, that was just his speculation. He did not know if it was true. Forget about him, even the 3 medium chiliocosm sovereigns did not know. So, there's nothing you can do about the worm either? If my true form were still around, I can naturally stomp it to death with ease. But now, the troll's intention was very clear. How could a troll with only a little consciousness deal with a worm? The worm in the medium chiliocosm was indeed not as simple as a tiny worm. In that case, Lin Feng did not hesitate at all. He said in a low voice, "River of space-time." Facing such a monster with the undying characteristic, Lin Feng had no better solution. He could only use the river of spacetime. The mighty river of spacetime enveloped down at once, sweeping the worm directly into the river of spacetime. Immediately, the worm seemed to have sensed danger as well. It struggled with all its might in the river of spacetime. However, the river of spacetime surpassed all rules and power. How could it break free so easily? As long as Lin Feng's small chiliocosm could withstand the burden, no one could break free from the river of spacetime. The worm entered the river of spacetime and struggled wildly. This massive body seemed to be filled with power. However, in the river of spacetime, the burden the worm placed on Lin Feng's small chiliocosm was not even as great as a 5-cataclysm chiliocosm sovereign, nor was it comparable to a 6-cataclysm chiliocosm sovereign. The truly troublesome aspect of the worm was its undying characteristic. Ordinary methods could not kill the worm at all. Even though Lin Feng had tried many times and could easily crush the worm, he still could not kill it. However, there was no true undying characteristic in the river of spacetime. No matter how miraculous the worm was, under the corrosion of the power of spacetime, its life force gradually became weaker and weaker. Lin Feng stared intently at the worm. He could see all the secrets of the worm from its regression. Perhaps he could also obtain the mystery of its undying characteristic. As the worm continued to regress, Lin Feng gradually used the river of spacetime to reverse time to the moment when the worm was at its weakest, or rather, the moment it had just formed. No one could transcend the power of spacetime unless they had superseded spacetime, and their past and future had been destroyed, making the true self unique. Then, Lin Feng's river of spacetime would be meaningless. However, apart from that, no power or life form could transcend the river of spacetime. Huh? That's a trace of spacetime power. As the river of spacetime swept through the worm, spacetime kept reversing until the moment the worm was born, and he saw the trace of essence power in the worm's body. That was the power of spacetime. Even though it was only a trace of spacetime power, its use was incomparably brilliant. It existed in the worm's body, and it was as if spacetime had completely stopped at that moment. The life essence of the worm was in that trace of spacetime power. If the spacetime power was static, the worm was equivalent to undying. No matter how one attacked, the worm would not be damaged at all, because its life essence always remained static and unchanging. Lin Feng's horizons were opened. He had really never thought that the power of spacetime could be used like this. Currently, Lin Feng's use of the power of spacetime was clearly still at a very basic level. For example, he could use the river of spacetime, or accelerate time and reverse it. Next was using the spacetime power to trap enemies, and so on. Lin Feng's horizons were broadened by the intricate use of the spacetime power in the worm. as the worm was regressed by Lin Feng's river of spacetime until the moment it was born. Finally, this trace of static spacetime power collided with Lin Feng's river of spacetime. There was no earth-shattering collision as imagined. After the two types of spacetime power collided, the trace of static spacetime power dissipated almost without any resistance. Lin Feng did not even have a chance to study it properly. As this trace of static spacetime power dissipated, the worm naturally died completely. Lin Feng gradually fell silent, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind, all of which were thoughts about the power of spacetime. The spacetime power on the worm gave Lin Feng a lot of inspiration. He mobilized a trace of spacetime power and wrapped it in his hand. He could stop this trace of spacetime power in his hand. However, once it left his control, the spacetime power would quickly dissipate. Forget about completely stopping, even staying for a long time was a problem. This meant that Lin Feng still did not understand much about the principle of spacetime, and his understanding was far from reaching a profound level. Were the worms born or created? Lin Feng looked at the completely dead worm and fell into deep thought. Creating life forms was actually nothing much. Any Kiliacosm sovereign could do it. After all, there were many life forms in the small Kiliacosms of the Kiliacosm sovereigns. However, Lin Feng knew that he could not create life forms like the worm yet. If it was innate, it would not be a big deal. There were all kinds of strange things in all kinds of worlds. Lin Feng was already used to it. However, if it was created, things would be different. This meant that there must be another expert who controlled the principle of spacetime behind the worm, an entity that had even more mastery in the principle of spacetime than Lin Feng. Perhaps only in the origin realm can I figure out the secret behind the worm, Lin Feng muttered softly. Previously, he only knew the name of the origin realm and did not have any specific concept. Lin Feng even wondered if the homeland the troll kept going on about was the legendary origin realm. But now, Lin Feng also had a trace of desire. He yearned to enter the origin realm. Perhaps then, he could have a deeper understanding of the principle of spacetime. However, even the three great medium Kiliacosm sovereigns could not find the origin realm. How could Lin Feng find it? He was just fantasizing now. Still, Lin Feng had a trace of hope. This beehive forbidden zone clearly did not belong to the medium Kiliacosm. It contained so much spacetime power that it very likely originated from the legendary origin realm. Perhaps there were some clues to the origin realm hidden in the beehive forbidden zone. What Lin Feng needed to do now was to leave this space first. Be it finding clues to the origin realm or obtaining the 100,000 portions of small Kiliacosm origin, he had to leave this space first.